It's a little bit analogous to a point that James Scott makes in talking about the way in which development theory has basically created huge problems in the developing world because scientific perspectives from, let's say, a school of forestry are brought into a Malaysian forest, and then concepts of forest management are simply imported without taking account of the local knowledge of the people who use the forest and have managed the forest.
Right.
And I guess the analogy in my mind is that the practitioner has a kind of dense local knowledge of how things work, how some policies either have worked or might work, and that is a good complement to the more abstract theoretical approach that an academic sociology research project might bring to it.
Yeah, there's an amazing gap. It's amazing to me whenever I rediscover it between what we bring, let's say, as developmental psychologists or sociologists of socialization, to the question of, say, how children learn and how they form alliances as peers within the school that sometimes defeats their capacity to be good students in the school. We bring these insights, and they are indeed insights. They're rich, thick understandings. But when you turn around and say, well, what would you do with that information in order to change the matrix of social relationships? We have a difficult time making that translation. Now, there are some social behavioral scientists who are at that very point of designing interventions, evidence-based, theory-driven interventions. But the next step is where we really need the practitioner. It's in that, will it actually be accepted? Will it work? Will this formulation of an intervention be adopted? Will it be taken like a course of medicine with fidelity for a long enough period of time to cure the malady? And if not, how can you overcome those barriers? That's where we don't really have the theoretical sophistication. It's their practical knowledge.
That's great. And that's something I think is very innovative about CARS, the idea of bringing together the expert scientific specialists with practitioners with a very rich, experience-based knowledge of the problem in question.
Yeah.
And it sounds as though the best way of testing the value of the approach is to see how successful these projects are and whether some breakthrough understandings and policies come out of them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the one last thing, if I may, on this, I think the practitioners are also latent theorists too, in the sense that they want to find solutions that will work, yes, first and foremost, in their own local circumstances, but they'd love to find something that transports to other places. Perhaps not on a one-to-one basis, but they're looking for an understanding of, and some generalities, as well as some specification.
That's really excellent. Something that you've talked about quite a bit as also being a feature of the CARS approach is the interdisciplinarity, the idea of bringing together a sociologist and an engineer to talk about transportation, for example. And again, it's a very intellectually exciting concept to me, and I wonder if you could just kind of talk a little bit about the fertility that you expect to come from these interdisciplinary collaborations.
Well, sometimes I think it's a layered relationship. I think the first and outer layer of it, the thing that's easiest to get, but having said that, it's never easy to really break through the ability to hear one's peers tell you about what they do, but the inability to hear one's distant relatives and understand them. So the engineer and the sociologist, let's say, the first thing that they get to do for each other is to share a different way of looking at the same thing. And to the extent that they have the patience for that, to break through the argots on both sides. To break through, on the one side, the impatience to get to a solution, or the unwillingness to think about a solution. I mean, those are differences of language and differences of perhaps practice or professional temperament that if you can actually break through one's own habits, there's something of value just to walk in the professional shoes of the other. But they're at a deeper level. It's being able to share in the construction of something that they feel is a joint product. That's harder. It's something that takes a longer period of time, working through these difficulties of understanding and different epistemologies and professional temperaments. Mm-hmm. But the thing that they offer to each other at this more synthetic level is the kind of satisfaction that they both have gone beyond what they were trained to do and the way they were trained to do it, to a joint venture that requires some flexibility on both their parts. It's I think the difference between a multidisciplinary approach and an interdisciplinary mm-hmm. approach. The synthesis is harder to come to and isn't always possible.
Where interdisciplinary would be more synthetic and multidisciplinary would be basically just adding the several disciplines
together.
Together.
It's kind of parallel play, but
mm-hmm.
with the intention of playing along in something that resembles the same game.
Mm-hmm. Now, when historians and sociologists of science talk about science as a progressive form of knowledge production, the idea of a paradigm, the idea of specialist knowledge, usually seems to come to the fore. That the way in which we make progress in science is by being specialized and by working within a research tradition which is strongly governed by standards of method and research and theory. And to be interdisciplinary is almost by definition to break the paradigm or to walk outside of your own disciplinary paradigm. Do you think there's is that a strength, or is that possibly a handicap to the problem of creating new social knowledge?
I guess the analogy I would draw, and it may not be the best one, is it's like learning a second language. And when you're multilingual, it's not that you don't understand any one of the languages any less well, although there's actually some research that suggests that learning a second language as an adult may in fact erode the mother tongue somewhat, the first language. But to keep it going for a moment here, I think it really is, as languages have different ways of constructing the phenomenal, the empirical world, and therefore encouraging the mind to think differently, and maybe even the person to act differently accordingly. I would say that this multi or interdisciplinary process allows a similar kind of mental flexibility. Mm-hmm. You don't give something up necessarily. I think you gain quite a lot more.
Mm-hmm. So it's really a way of almost institutionalizing a process that invites innovation and creativity in the conduct of scientific work.
Precisely.